it worked. Hello, my friends. It's Jill Osborne from the Interstitial Cystitis Network. It is Sunday, June 21st of 2026. Happy Father's Day. I would not be here today if I had not had such a fabulous father who took me to the ER, who bandaged my wounds, who picked me up when I fell, and this is his third Heavenly Father's Day. So I want to say Happy Father's Day to my lovely dad, Jack Osborne. My purpose in doing these meetings is to educate, inspire, inform. I want patients to walk with confidence into their doctor's office. I want patients to know that there are treatments available. I don't want you suffering in silence at home alone at all. There is hope. There is always hope. And my job is to try to give you that hope. A couple minutes late, having a little trouble setting up Facebook, as the internet is known for being somewhat challenging at times. Here we go. We are live streaming right now on YouTube and on Facebook. And it's looking pretty good, I think. Hello, you guys. Hello. I hope your IC's doing well today. How are you feeling? What's going on with your IC and your pelvic pain? Now, let's just wait a couple minutes. We'll wait for a few people to come on in, more people to come on in. As always, I'm happy to take any questions that you might have about IC, even off topic. Feel free. Let me introduce myself. I am Jill Osborne. I'm the founder of the Interstitial Cystitis Network. Hello, Ann. I am an IC researcher. I am an IC educator. I have been a support group leader for 33 years and counting. This will be in fact, I started my very first support group exactly 33 years ago, like almost exactly this month. Who knew that I would be so persistent and determined? Hello, Larry's still in pain. Hey, Decker says, ugh, I'm feeling ugh. What did you do? What did you do with the urgency to pee? It's awful. Hello, Robbie. It's nice to see you too. Let's talk about that for a moment. Urgency is driven by the alpha afferent nerve in your bladder wall. So your bladder only has two sets of nerves. It's got the alpha afferent nerve, which controls frequency urgency, and it's got the C fiber that controls pain. Now, generally, the alpha afferent nerve is a very easy nerve to turn on because that's a nerve that tells you when you need to pee. The C fiber pain nerve is much harder to turn on, and it generally takes some sort of traumatic event or trauma to the bladder to make those nerves fire. So the very first symptom that patients are going to experience when their bladder gets irritated is going to be frequency and urgency. It's the first symptom to happen, and it's the last symptom to go away. It just is what it is. This is a nerve that takes time to calm down. So your job now is to try to figure out, why is that nerve provoked in the first place? So it can be provoked in a couple of different ways. It can be provoked by caffeine. It can be provoked if the surface of your bladder is compromised in some way. So your bladder doesn't have that nice thick coating, so urine is now penetrating deeper into the bladder wall, reaching those nerves and irritating those nerves. So, again, and guys, I have to pound away at this because you wouldn't believe the people who call me every single week, and they're not following the IC diet, and they're paying a terrible price for it. And so we always have to circle back and look at the easy stuff before we do the hard stuff, which is like, are you drinking coffee every day, even once a week? We could potentially cause long-term persistent frequency and urgency. And then the question is, how do we calm that nerve down? Well, from a self-help standpoint, number one, dilute your urine. Drink some water. If there's some acid in your urine that's bothering your bladder, then dilute it. Number two, alkalinize your urine. If we want to reverse that acid, you can do something that will improve the pH and increase the pH, whether it be sucking on some Tums or taking a couple of Pre-Leaf. You could do something that's soothing to your bladder wall, like allopath. Aloe doesn't repair the nerves. It doesn't repair the bladder wall, but if you had a sharp sunburn, you could put aloe on it, and that would be a little bit of soothing. So you could do a little bit of aloe. Now, I don't support aloe use for a long period of time. We don't have any research that shows that that's helpful, but I think that for a bladder wall flare, when those nerves are really struggling, you can go with aloe, a little bit of aloe. And again, we have it on our website. It's called Allopath. That's the best one, in my opinion. And the reason why it's the best one is it combines aloe with an ingredient called PEA that calms nerves down. And that's the next thing we want to do, is we want to calm those nerves down on your bladder wall. So PEA, palmitoyl ethanolamide, that has absolutely changed the face of IC care and pelvic pain care and chronic pain care. The IC study that came out in 2019 showed that 87% of patients reported a significant and progressive reduction in their pain over time. Nerves can be irritated if your muscles are super tight. That would be an issue. Nerves can be irritated for a number of other reasons too, like if you've got Tarlov cysts and things like that. But let's go with the easy things first. All right, here, hold on a sec. All right, so, and Robbie says, is it Elmiron okay in an infusion? I turned it down, but I did get a lidocaine infusion. So it's actually not an infusion. An infusion is into the bloodstream. It's an instillation. And the answer is probably not. We now have our first reported case. In fact, I'm going to talk about this today, of a patient who received bladder installations of Elmiron and developed retinal disease. Okay, so if you're going for a bladder installation that's calming and soothing, the number one therapy around the world is actually a heparin lidocaine installation, not an Elmiron lidocaine. Heparin is as a protective coating for the bladder wall. Lidocaine turns nerves off. So rather than going with the pentosan Elmiron, I would consider going instead with the heparin. Now, guys, huge week, huge research week. And the reason why is because they published the results of a big IC conference that was done in Japan about 18 months ago. And the research that came out of that really, really, really good. But let me talk about the latest Elmiron study first, because for those of you who get my newsletter, I sent out a newsletter to 35,000 patients on Friday afternoon, and I highlighted a brand new study that came out, and then we're going to get to the Hunner's lesion study. Here's that study. Spectrum of calopathy and severe polyposis associated with pentosan maculopathy. And so this research team went back and looked at 8 patients over a 6-year period. This is something called a case series. And in fact, this is how this all started. We have to have case series because we have to be able to show in specific patient cases what's happening. And so you can't extrapolate, well, it's only 6 patients. That's not what this study does. We already have good research which shows that Elmiron-associated eye and bowel disease are happening in a significant number of patients. The importance of this case series is that it's looking at patients over a 6-year period. And it's allowing us then to look at how their eyes have changed and what's going on with the bowel. And so this is 6 women, 2 men, average age 68 and a half years old. They studied 16 eyes because every patient has 2 eyes, so a total of 16 eyes. 7 out of 8 took Elmiron orally. 1 out of 8 took it as injections for arthritis. 75% of these patients had severe polyposis in their bowel. And you know what? They were asymptomatic. They had no clue anything was going on with their bowel. When they went and had their routine colonoscopies, they found that their bowels were filled with polyps. So this is, in my opinion, quite staggering that 75% of these patients had severe bowel issues. But let's look at what happened with their eyes first. Number one, all of the patients had blurry vision. Okay. And then 2 of them had something called metamopsia. And that means that lines are now crooked and curving and eyesight's kind of distorted. It might have weird angles and things like that. So in this study at baseline, very first part of the study, 10 out of 16 eyes were stage 1, mild. 5 out of 16 were stage 2. 1 out of 16 were stage 3. At the end of the study, only 4 remained stage 1. There were now 8 who were at stage 2 and 4 that were at stage 3. So that shows 6 out of 16 showed very clear progression over time of eye issues. 5 out of 16 showed atrophy in their eyes at the beginning of the study. 12 out of 16 showed atrophy at the end of this follow-up period. Okay, so this showed new onset and or a progression of atrophy of their retinas. That was cool. Then they have a lot of other tests. There were very clear signs of scarring. There were signs that they call it outer retinal tubulations, which occur after injuries of the eye. There was progressive corticopillary flow deficits, which is a reduction of blood flow in the retina, which is also a biomarker for retinal disease. There was scar tissue, et cetera, et cetera. All right, now let's look at the gut, because this is really quite stunning. 6 out of 8 had severe colonic polyposis with a confirmation of dysplasia and tubular adenoma. Okay, so what this means, dysplasia means cells have changed. When you've got dysplasia, that then becomes a risk factor for cancer. 3 out of those patients required a partial or total colectomy. They had to have portions of their bowel removed or their entire bowel removed. Now, why is this important? Why are polyps problematic? Well, number one, big risk factor of cancer. Number two, they can grow so severe, you can develop a bowel obstruction. They can bleed profusely, which can cause anemia. And there are a couple of other conditions like that. But the real big thing, the reason why they're focusing on removing these sections of the bowel is to reduce your risk of cancer and to prevent bowel obstruction. I have worked with one patient, for example, who had carpet polyps, but she had a couple of very, very large polyps, like the size of a walnut or bigger, that really were beginning to block the passage of stool along her colon. 3 out of 8 showed inflammatory changes in their gut. One had Crohn's, one had ulcerative colitis, one had microscopic cystitis. 2 out of 3 had inflammatory bowel disease without neoplasia. 1 out of 3 had ulcerative colitis. Okay. The median time to onset of these bowel changes was considered 10 years. But in this case series, the range was actually 1 year to 32 years. And again, because these patients are asymptomatic, they don't even know to look in their bowel, right? So we really don't know true incidence because, yikes, there are no symptoms. So why would a patient look? But in this study, one patient had observable changes in their bowel in the first year. At the other extreme, another patient didn't find changes in their bowel until 32 years. But again, asymptomatic. Why would you look? And here's the take-home message of this. Remember in our black box warning for Elmiron, we now say you need to get your eyes checked regularly, right? Retinal exams. They want you to have a retinal exam before you even start the medication. They want you to have consistent, persistent retinal exams over time, maybe one a year, to track for any changes in your retina. Because obviously, if you're starting to see changes in your retina, it's probably time to stop the medication. And no, too, we have research that shows that the damage can progress even after stopping the medication, right? So the sooner you know, the sooner you can potentially try to protect your eyes. These guys are now saying they suggested every patient have routine colonoscopies, screening in patients on pentosan, regardless of if you have bowel symptoms or not. And so Terry says, I took Elmiron for 17 years. I have macro degeneration, I have ulcerative colitis, and last year you had to have colon resection due to a large flat polyp. Now, Terry, did you have any idea that Elmiron was linked to this? This is why our eye researchers at Emory are true heroes, because even though we had a series of small case studies and publications from other researchers that showed that patients taking the medication were having significant bowel issues, and more importantly, that some of those case studies showed that as soon as the patient stopped the medication, their bowel symptoms went away and their bowel returned to normal. Okay, so we have that. That's published. I have all that on our website. And yet we just didn't understand the complexity and totality of this research and the effects of Elmiron on the bowel. And it really wasn't until the Emory researchers looked at their population of eye patients and saw that the vast majority of them also had severe bowel issues, and that a significant number of them had portions of their bowel removed. And Terry says here, she had no idea that her bowel issues were linked potentially to Elmiron use. Now, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. So I'm going to read this to you. This is the last sentence of this paper, right? Given the severity and irreversibility of these associated complications, further evaluation is warranted to determine whether continued approved use of pentosan should be revoked or more tightly regulated. So this is the first time we now have researchers on the record in a major study saying, hey, FDA, you need to look at this again. Given the severity and irreversibility of these associated complications. And Terry, I hope that you have filed with the MedWatch system. MedWatch is the way the FDA tracks adverse events. It's really important that you go right now, Google MedWatch database or MedWatch report, and let them know that this happened to you, because there are really significant questions and issues about this medication, and the fact that patients, I'm working with some patients who not only have lost their eyesight, they've lost their bowel. Whoops. Okay, hold on a sec. There we go. And the FDA takes very seriously when body parts have to be removed, and you had a body part removed. Do I think that this product should it be on the market today? I have very, very strong doubts now. And at a minimum, what we're trying to do now, I'm working with Emory. We're creating a patient registry. They're reviewing it right now. So that we can collect much more data. Because here's the thing, like Terry, patients have never made the connection between Elmiron and bowel issues. And yet the irony is we knew from day one. I mean, I was a support group leader in 1996 when this was approved. We knew from day one that patients were having diarrhea. I mean, we knew that. And we were also told the reason they were having diarrhea was it was a reaction to the capsule. And so the company told somebody else who told us as support group leaders, just tell patients to take it out of the capsule and their bowel symptoms should get better. Well, now we know that that simply was not true. Now we know that it's the medication itself that's doing this. And I still remember this gentleman, man, this must have been like, oh man, like 2 or 3 years after it was approved. He'd taken it for a year. He was fine for a year and then developed horrific diarrhea, like incredibly severe Crohn's disease / inflammatory bowel disease. And I remember him calling and saying, do you know anything about this? And at the time, all we knew was it could be from the capsule. And I said, well, they say to take it out of the capsule. I wish I could go back in time. I wish we could all go back in time with this new information to try to protect people because they just didn't know. The purpose of a litigation is to try to establish what the company knew. I mean, the company has on their drug information sheet the risk of colitis. So clearly they had documented some bowel issues before. I just don't think we really understood the severity of what was happening. So this is huge because, and let me just throw this out here. Now, granted, this is a case series where they followed 8 patients that they picked who they already knew had retinal disease. Okay. If there is even a remote chance that 75% of patients taking Elmiron develop bowel disease, that is massive. But again, we don't have the statistics yet. We don't know. This study says they found it in 75% of patients. And that is, woo, something else. Now, here's the other really important thing about this study. Or this paper. Terry says, hers started with diarrhea. You were diagnosed with IBS, later inflammatory bowel disease upon colonoscopy. Right, the typical onset. So when this all came out, the impression was that the only patients who took it for a long period of time were at great risk. You know, so everybody was saying, you know, you got to take it like 20 years. I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to remember the exact language that was used. The powers that be were saying the risk was associated with very long-term use, large quantities, long-term use, right? And in this study, the average grams of Elmiron that patients were exposed to was 2,899 grams. Okay. But the range is far more important because guess what? Somebody developed this with just 45 grams. At the highest dose, somebody was exposed to almost 5,000 grams. They took it for a massive amount of time. Somebody else, just 45 grams, a tiny amount. And they developed recognizable retinal disease. They received it, I believe, here, hold on a sec. I think that was the patient here. I've got all the case reports right here. They took it, they had a subcutaneous injection for arthritis. So they were only exposed to 45 grams. They was given it as an injection for arthritis. And this is patient 3 in the study. They have moderate retinal disease and microscopic colitis. Okay, observable changes in the colon. So patient 1 took 1,879 grams. She took it for 15 years. She's got severe maculopathy and severe polyposis, and she had a colectomy. Patient number 2, also a female, took it for 15 years. She has a moderate retinal disease and was diagnosed with Crohn's disease in her bowel, and it looks like she had an ileostomy. Patient number 3 is the gentleman who had it subcutaneously. See, I mean, this is important. Doctors have to see this range of how this presents in so many different patients. Okay, here is patient number 4 is a gentleman, 72 years old. He took it for 25.8 years, was exposed to 33,723 grams. He's got moderate maculopathy and ulcerative colitis with severe polyposis. Patient number 5, female, age 48 years old. She took it for 25 years. See, my God, see, she started taking it when she was 24 years old. Now, listen, if you knew at the age of 24 that there was a medication that could potentially permanently damage your eyes and or bowel, would you take that? No, of course not. I mean, there's got to be a really good, compelling explanation for anybody to take a medication that could be that damaging. Anyway, so she was exposed to 2,798 grams. She's got moderate retinal damage with an increase of lesions, grade 2, and she's got ulcerative colitis and massive polyposis. And here's the thing. None of these patients had colonoscopies because they were worried about this. They had colonoscopies just to make sure they didn't have, it's just a routine colonoscopy you get after the age of 50. These are your accidental findings. Let's see, hold on a sec. There was just one more in here okay, patient 6, 3,300 grams, moderate maculopathy and severe polyposis, and she had a colectomy. Patient number 7 took it for 32 years, 4,872 grams. And yet, interestingly, she has mild maculopathy, but she has severe polyposis. Polyposis is the uncontrollable growth of polyps in your bowel, just so you know. And then patient number 8 took it for 19 years, 3,000 grams, and she is mild maculopathy with severe polyposis. Okay? So this is not good. Should the black box warning be expanded to inform patients of the risk of bowel issues and encourage patients to have colonoscopies? Absolutely, in my opinion. We've got to work to do that now. Allison said, what are the pills or powders you recommend the bladder, something that you would like to try? Allison, it really depends upon what your IC phenotype is. So if you have Hunner's lesions, that's what we're going to talk about next, and you want to try a supplement, it would be lactoferrin. If you've got estrogen atrophy, it would be a chondroitin-based supplement like Bladder Builder or Bladder Rest. If you've got nerve pain, it would be palmitoyl ethanolamide. Those are the primary way we're looking at this right now. Lisa says, hi, Jill. Thank you for all that you do to support the IC community. Sending you hugs from Kansas. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you. Sarah says, thankfully, I am unaware of long-term adverse events from Elmiron. I have not yet had a colonoscopy. I am unsure how long I took Elmiron. Well, it would be very smart to have a colonoscopy at this point in time just to make sure your bowel is healthy and safe, right? That's just vital here. Again, the early here's the thing, guys, about cancer. Speaking as a cancer patient, the earlier you catch it, the easier it is to treat. And the thing with polyps is that polyps have a significant risk of cancer. So the earlier you find them, the earlier you get rid of them, the better it can be. We have no data that has associated pentosan with cancer yet. You know, this is early. This is very, very early. I mean, we've really only been following this for about 2 years now. So it takes time to do this kind of research. Allison said, definitely bladder builder and poly. I don't understand, Allison. Sarah said, I've had rectal bleeding freely this year. I hope it was just hemorrhoids. Well, you got to, girl, you got to find out. I mean, and listen, we can talk about this. Colonoscopies are not nearly as bad as people make them out to be. I mean, they're embarrassing as hell. The hardest part of a colonoscopy is just the prep. You know, preps, because, you know, you basically have to, if your colonoscopy is scheduled for 10 a.m., you're going to start your prep at 5 p.m. the night before. You basically don't eat big stuff for a couple of days. You want to be very gentle, because the more you put in, the more that's got to come out during the prep. There are a number of different preps that they do. And kind of the rule for a prep is having a sense of humor, having a really good book, having an iPad, and you're just going to camp in the bathroom. Or you're going to camp in the room nearest the bathroom. And you have to have a rule for anybody that you're living with. That bathroom is completely off limits. Nobody can use that bathroom while you are going through that prep, because you will be running to the bathroom and you will have seconds to get there, you know, when you're at the tail end of that prep. So, you know, it's a small price to pay to keep you safe. I had my first colonoscopy at 50. I haven't had one since, but I have the test every year. If they ever find any blood in there, I am going right in there. I'm not afraid of the colonoscopy prep at all. My God, how many times have we all had diarrhea anyway? It's just like diarrhea on steroids. But once it's done, it's done. And if anybody has concerns about it, just know that very, very few patients ever flare from a colonoscopy prep. The best colonoscopy prep, in my opinion, is the Miralax protocol. You just take 5 biscotals before, and then you do Miralax with water or Miralax with whatever drink you can drink. And I'm happy to go through that with anybody and share the experiences that I had with it. And the only thing, let me just tell you a funny story, but this is a very, very true story. Okay. So I did my prep, you know, I get driven down to the center, and you're very quickly brought into your staging area. You take your clothes off. They give you an IV. They give you a little medication to chill you out so that you're not panicking. And it's always good to get that little IV just to kind of calm you down. It's a win all the way around. And then they basically wheel you into the prep room. And generally, they have you lay on your side. And then you usually don't remember anything after you lay on your side. Some people are kind of awake during it, but you're really chilled out. Other people are asleep. So when they wheeled me in, I said to the nurse, I said, this will be a win if I remember nothing. I mean, you knock me out. I don't need to remember anything. And she kind of looked at me and she just kind of very seriously said, I can't promise that. And I said, you don't understand. True story. Back when I had really bad IBS when I was in my 20s, and I had a doctor try to do a bowel exam with me completely awake, I kicked him in the face. Dr. Tim Pyle. I was in so much pain. I had no control over my legs, and I kicked. And so anyway, that was in my 20s. So here I'm getting ready for this colonoscopy. And I just said, you have to understand, the last time somebody tried to do this, I kicked the doctor in the face. What's really funny is that as I'm laying on my side looking up at her, the doctor's head pops up behind a little portable wall He's like, what? And he comes very quickly walking over to me. And he's like, are you serious? And I went, oh, hell yeah, I'm serious. It is in your best interest to make sure I remember nothing. And he looked at the nurse. She looked at him and he went, and he nodded, and they knocked me out. And I have no memory of anything. So I'm not afraid of a colonoscopy at all. Oh my God. You know, listen, when you're in your 20s, it's embarrassing as hell. When you're in your 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s, it's like, it's just part of it. But Sarah, you got to get that rectal bleeding checked out. Okay. For sure. For sure. All right. Now let's look that I've got one other study that I want to share. So, and it's the teaser that I used on the image on our YouTube channel. There was a very large international IC conference in Japan, and they finally published all of it in the International Journal of Urology. And then another article popped up from the French Journal of Urology, and it was the management of bladder pain syndrome of Hunner's lesions, a series of 32 cases. So they followed 32 patients with lesions to determine what worked for them. And this is fascinating. So patients were divided into two groups. Group number one received bladder installations or Elmiron, pentosan, or cimetidine. Group number two had cauterization or transurethral resection in which they cut out the Hunner's lesion. So the primary objective of this paper was to see which one worked the best in reducing pain. Okay, so 32 patients were included. Group number one had 9, group number two had 23. Only one patient found any success with bladder installations or Elmiron. 18 out of 23, 78%, had success from direct lesion treatment. So in group one, the only pain resolution was observed after one DMSO treatment. And in group two, people did much better with lesion therapy. 3 patients required re-intervention, working on the lesions again. 2 for bladder perforation, 1 for bladder repair, 1 for gross hematuria, which is a lot of bleeding. And 4 patients, eventually, their lesions were so severe they had to have their bladder removed. And that's rare, but that's important. So in the case of bladder pain syndrome with a bladder phenotype and 1 or more Hunner's lesions, treatment of the lesion was far more effective than bladder installations. Now, the reason why I say this, bring this up, is that we have known for about a decade or longer now that bladder therapies in general, like bladder installations and Elmiron, are just pointless for Hunner's lesions. There's just no data showing that they're helpful. Whereas we absolutely do know that working on the lesion directly by cauterizing the lesion or injecting a steroid into the lesion, or in extreme cases, actually removing that lesion surgically, is going to be the best way to reduce pain. And that's the heartbreak, is because Hunner's lesions are agonizingly painful. I mean, it's a big bloody wound in your bladder. And the problem is that wound is bathed in urine all day, every day. And so it's like pouring acid onto an open wound all day, every day. And these lesions can become so painful that patients cannot function. They're like down to eating 4 to 5 foods. They're bedbound. They are in agony. it is infuriating when these patients call me and share their story, and they say they were diagnosed with lesions 20 years ago. They were never treated for them. Like the doc put them on Elmiron, or the doc put them on antidepressants. Nobody actually touched the lesion and worked with the lesion. And these patients are stunned to find out that they could have and should have done that. That if we want to try to reduce the pain and try to get you feel better, we got to work with that lesion directly. And that is fundamentally what we've learned in the last 25 years. And this is why our national guidelines say, if you're not responding to therapy, if you're getting worse rather than better, stop what you're doing, take a step back and revisit the diagnosis. If bladder therapies aren't getting you relief, why are you keeping to take them? Don't keep taking them. If bladder therapies aren't working, maybe you have to ask, is it my bladder? Is there something else going on that we could have been missing? Could it be tight pelvic floor muscles? Phenotyping. Could it be another related condition? Could it be endometriosis attached to your bladder? Could it be a fibroid tumor push on your bladder? Could it be a tailbone injury? There are a number of conditions that can cause these symptoms, And okay, so Rebecca said here, you took 13 years for them to treat your lesions. So painful. You had surgery last December. Exactly. 13 years. Like, why are they waiting? And you know what the fundamental problem is that we got great guidelines, but the doctors don't read them. I mean, I've served on guideline committees. I mean, you've got like excellent, the best doctors in the world, the best researchers in the world, working for months to create treatment guidelines for IC and for pelvic pain and male pelvic pain, female pelvic pain, etc. I'm on the male pelvic pain committee. And I can tell you the knowledge and practical expertise that has gone through these guidelines is excellent. The guidelines in general are excellent. The only people that read them are basically residents, new doctors. And that's why, and that was one of the questions I posed when we released the male pelvic guidelines exactly a year ago is, okay, how do we get doctors to read them? Got a great set of guidelines. The guidelines say if you got Hunner's lesions, treat it this way. How do we get that local doctor to read these guidelines? Very difficult, but that's where you have power because you walk into those doctors' offices. Every time you do, that is an opportunity where you become the educator, where you say, hey, doc, so, you showed that I had Hunner's lesions 5 years ago. I've been doing my reading and we haven't really treated the Hunner's lesions. Here are the national guidelines. The national guidelines say we want to laser them or we want to do this or that. Could we do that, please? Because I am suffering. I am in pain. And it is very clear that what you have been giving me has not resolved this pain. And we've missed the opportunity to fix the underlying problem, which is the lesion. And of course, underneath that is trying to understand why lesions happen in the first place. So we now have 3 very, very clear theories as to what causes lesions. Number 1, viruses. It's a viral infection. They've now found the Epstein-Barr virus, the polyoma virus in the urine of patients with lesions is not in the urine of patients without lesions. And I'll never forget, last year I was working with a lady who was in her 60s who had suddenly developed a lot of lesions and they were really painful. She was looking for help and we started talking about the virus and I was like, okay, so here we now know that there can be viral infection. Have you been exposed to mono? She said, I don't think so. Well, she went to the doctor and had a blood test and guess what? She had very severe mononucleosis. So that's where her lesions came from. Similarly, I had a mother call me who had a 13-year-old who had a dozen lesions in her bladder. And that is ridiculous. That's a first. Children normally don't show lesions. And she had a massive amount of lesions. And I said, have you guys had any exposure to mono in your home? She said, yes. Her sister that she shares a bedroom with had very severe mono 6 months earlier, and it was a very difficult case of mono that took months to get better. So now it turns out the younger sister, who now had all these lesions, probably had the Epstein-Barr affecting not her lungs, but her bladder. Because in the end, viruses can travel. Remember with COVID, people think COVID is a respiratory virus. It's a blood vessel virus. It attacks the circulatory system. And that is why so many patients who've had COVID have blood clots. Once it's in the circulatory system, it travels throughout the body. So we have found COVID in the bladder wall. Really, we have. You know, those are the sicker patients, but they're there. All right, hold on a sec. It's actually really hot here, and I'm kind of sweating like a beast, so bear with me. Sarah says, dealing with medical systems insurance adds to my distress. I'm also now concerned about the cost of care. I owe LabCorp $222 for vaginal fluid testing, less invasive than a vaginal exam. Wow. How did you get the fluid without doing the vaginal exam? I mean, that's unusual. Remember that if you're of a certain age, you are gone through menopause, whether it's surgical, whether it's chemical menopause, or you're just getting older, it's very common to get bacterial vaginosis. It's very common to feel like you have yeast infections, and in fact, they're actually bacterial infections rather than fungal infections. But you can also have fungal infections if you've taken a lot of antibiotics. And, you know, listen, I see patients, if there's one patient group that's been massively overexposed to antibiotics, it's IC patients, because we've all taken intense antibiotics, long-term antibiotics, under the assumption that we all had infection. When we don't, what we have instead for most of us is injury or trauma. Most IC patients are neuromuscular rather than bladder wall, and that's why our bladders generally look normal. And yes, even though you have pain as your bladder fills with urine, that gets better once you urinate, that can actually be caused by muscles and nerves and not the bladder wall itself. We do phenotyping. Eddie says, how are you doing? On Friday, I had hernia surgery, and I'm now getting terrible bladder spasms. I'm taking aloe and cyclobenzaprine, also Tylenol and Advil. Okay, so Eddie, here's the deal. Whenever you have major surgery, the worst day is like day 2 and day 3 after surgery, right? So you are just beginning that healing process after major surgery, which means that all the nerves are tweaked, the muscles are tweaked, and I'm not surprised that you're having a bladder flare. So aloe soothing, cyclobenzaprine, nice muscle relaxant, but cyclobenzaprine is not for bladder spasms. Cyclobenzaprine is for pelvic floor spasms. Cyclobenzaprine is a skeletal muscle relaxant. If you're actually having bladder spasms, you would do oxybutynin, you would do a ditropan product, something like that instead. So that's an issue. But if you had a catheter during that surgery or post-op, it's also quite common to get nosocomial bladder infections. Those are infections that are acquired in a healthcare setting. And so terrible bladder spasms can be a sign of a post-operative bladder infection. It is perfectly reasonable for them to take a urine sample, and let's just make sure you don't have an infection from the procedure itself. It's very, very possible. I mean, listen, congratulations, the surgery is over. Woo, done. You are now in the healing process, and you now potentially could have infection after that. So call your doctor. If you need to go to urgent care, go to urgent care. Let them know you had surgery, and we want to get your urine screened just to make sure, right? But let your surgeon know that you're struggling with severe pain. Hopefully they gave you pain meds, because Tylenol and Advil do nothing for post-surgical pain. Normally, for several days afterwards, you would use an opiate like Norco to really calm and silence those nerves down, right? So, you know, I know that there are some people who are telling patients, oh, you can recover, you just need Advil. I call bullshit on that. Speaking as a double mastectomy patient with massive incisions, I could never have gotten through that on Advil or Tylenol. I was struggling with Norco. Larry says, bladder builder looks good. Yeah, baby. Nick says, obviously everyone is suffering. I see, like myself, the worst debilitating chronic disease manageable. Well, again, Larry, we actually don't look at it as a disease so much anymore as we do an injury or trauma. And our goal here is to try to identify the underlying injury or trauma so that we can potentially fix that if it's fixable. Hello, Donna, my dear friend Donna. I hope you are doing well. I miss you. Eddie says, I did have a catheter with urine sample. They gave you oxycodone. Okay. So did you mean you had the catheter during the surgery, or you had the catheter to give you to make a urine sample when this happened? I'm glad you've got the oxycodone, use it. If you're suffering, it's okay to use it. If it has a score down the middle, and then you can even cut it in half. You cannot cut in half medications that do not have a natural score down the middle, where it's very clear that it can be cut. If it's just a plain solid pill, you cannot cut that in half. If you have any doubts, talk to your pharmacist, talk to your doctor about if you can do that or not. Post-op infection, very, very possible. All right. Now, let's see here. So I am here. So normally our meetings can go anywhere from 2 hours to, my longest meeting was 5 or 6 hours. I am here as long as you have questions. But before we go there, I've got more stuff to talk about. So hold on a sec. Sleep apnea has been linked to IC now. So hold on a sec. Here, hold on. I'm on the wrong computer. I got to be on the right computer. Okay, hold on a sec. So if you don't get the IC Network newsletter, you go over to the IC Network and sign up for it. It's free. I write it. We don't send out spam. It doesn't go out every day. It's not going to annoy you. In fact, people want me to send out more. I tend to go 6 weeks with a long newsletter than every week with a short newsletter. The trend is every week for a short newsletter, and that's a little bit hard to do. So here, hold on a sec. Let me get to what I need. There it is. Okay, so let's go through some of the announcements that I made on Friday. Number one, the food app is now live and available on Android and Apple. The IC 101 food app. So if you're diet sensitive and you're going shopping and you don't know what to buy, or you're out at a restaurant and you don't know what to eat, you can just have this on your phone. It's fantastic. Great AI in it. AI based on our website, and I'm really, really thrilled with our apps. So that is out. Okay, hold on a second. Okay, we announced a clinical trial. Clinical trials have slowed down substantially in the IC world. The reason why is you can't put apples, oranges, and bananas in the same study and expect success. And so of the hundreds of millions of dollars invested in trying to create new treatments for IC, the vast majority of those studies failed. And they failed because, again, you cannot expect a Hunner's lesion patient to respond the same way as an estrogen atrophy patient, at the same way as a pelvic floor patient, the same way as widespread pain. And so most companies took a pretty big step back from IC, just because they had lost lots and lots of money. And I've worked with almost every major pharmaceutical company that's worked in the IC space. And I had been pounding into them from day one, don't put every IC patient into the same study. You have to phenotype first. Now, in this new study, which is done by Vineltex, they are studying a new bladder installation, which is a heparin lidocaine installation to reduce bladder pain in men and women. And it's great to see this because we have to have ways to give you more comfort. We already know that rescue installations can be very, very helpful. They're studying a very, very specific dosage, and they've got study locations around the United States or all over the United States. So, and what's the advantage of a clinical trial? Well, number one, it's free. You don't pay for it. So, in this era where money is very, very tight and treatments are very, very tight, when you participate in a clinical trial, you get free medical care. That's meaningful. Number two, it gets you in the door of some of the leading IC doctors around the country. Doctors who might not be able to see you for 3 to 6 months. If you sign up for a clinical trial, you get in quickly because they are working very hard on these clinical trials. Clinical trials aren't for everyone. If you are in absolute agony and you need help right away, is participating in a clinical trial the right thing? Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe pain care is going to be the right thing for you. On the other hand, there are moments when you can give the IC world an incredible gift, and that is the gift of your time and the gift of your IC by helping us understand if a treatment can help. So anyway, we've got this new clinical trial. You can find the information for that over on the IC network in our clinical trials center. We are asking every single patient who has any bowel or eye symptoms to file with MedWatch immediately and let them know what your symptom is. This is a massive, vital source of data that we can use to request black box warnings, to expand the FDA's knowledge of how this medication is affecting patients, and then used as information to justify changes in warnings, maybe even pulling it from the market or requiring much more restricted use. So please Google MedWatch reporting. It's not medwatch.com. That's a whole nother company. It's with the US FDA. Please file that report. Okay, for sure. Now let's talk about sleep apnea for a moment. The IC sleep apnea connection. Most patients and many doctors don't know that people with sleep apnea have a significantly elevated IC risk, that women with sleep apnea score higher in IC symptoms, and that some nocturia blamed on urgency may actually be sleep apnea driven and not bladder driven. So I have a big article on our website on that. And let me just go through the first part of that so you'll have it. If IC keeps you up at night, you probably blame the urgency or pressure. After all, you've had that trip to the bathroom at 2 a.m. and again at 4 a.m. But what if the relationship between IC and sleep runs deeper than most of us realize? A growing body of research is exploring exactly that. And what it's finding matters for how we think about managing IC every single day. Okay, anyway, I will let you read that study over on our website. It's right on the front page. Okay. We also have a new development with polycystic ovarian syndrome and IC. Polycystic ovarian syndrome is found in some, but certainly not all women with IC. Obviously, it's not found in men with IC. They have now convened and created new, what they call nomenclature for IC. And I'm sorry, nomenclature for polycystic ovarian syndrome in May 2026, after 14 years of global research and collaboration. PCOS was officially renamed polyendocrine metabolic ovarian syndrome, also known as PMOS, PMOS, PMOS. So for women in our community managing this along with IC, this is more than a vocabulary change. It's a shift in how the condition is understood, diagnosed, and treated. And that shift matters for your whole body care. So what are the threads that connect the two? Inflammation. Both PCOS, PMOS, and IC involve low-grade ongoing inflammation. PCOS is associated with systemic inflammation that can affect tissues throughout the body, including the sensitive lining of the bladder, hormones, and the pelvic floor. So again, we have a very large article over on our website on this. What else did I talk about? Oh, Tarlov cysts and IC. The Tarlov Cyst Association contacted me 2 weeks ago, asked us if we would help to raise awareness on this. Tarlov cysts are little tiny sacs of spinal fluid that can emerge from the spinal cord. And when they emerge, they press on nerves. And if they happen to be down at L4, L5, lumbar 4, lumbar 5, or even lower, that has the potential of influencing bladder, causing bladder issues and pelvic pain. So many people diagnosed with IC spend years searching for answers of chronic bladder pain, urgency, pelvic pressure, and painful sitting. What many patients don't realize is that some of these patients may overlap with symptomatic Tarlov cyst disease. While research has not yet proven a direct causal relationship, there are important anatomical and neurological reasons why these diagnoses may overlap. And we have worked with many Tarlov cyst patients over the years. What else? 84% of women with IC feel dismissed by their doctors. In contrast, most men, 90% of men, feel that their symptoms were taken very seriously. Women were more likely to be excluded from treatment decisions, more likely to feel uninformed, and more likely to report feeling stigmatized, specifically for being a woman in chronic pain. The average woman with IC waited 7.44 years for first symptoms to diagnosis, and that's not a gap, that's a failure. If this has been your experience, we want you to know your pain is real, your symptoms are real, and you deserve a provider who treats you that way. So we have a big article on that over on the IC Network website. Now, from a self-help standpoint, hello, happy solstice. Summer solstice, longest day of the year, longest daytime day of the year is today. And first official day of summer. And what's our favorite sport in summer? Swimming. Now, swimming is really a great exercise in general, and it's particularly good if you've got pelvic floor dysfunction or scoliosis like I do. Swimming helps my back so much. I tend to have a lot of back pain from my scoliosis, especially more recently. However, some patients appear to react to pool chemicals. High chlorine levels, freshly treated pools, especially hot tubs, can be significant irritants for a sensitive bladder. Hotel pools in particular are worth approaching with extra caution. You couldn't pay me to go into a hotel pool unless they can verify that it has been treated regularly and they can give you treatment dates. Because, when you get into a pool that's untreated, you're walking into a stew of every bacteria that everybody's been in that pool potentially has on their skin and elsewhere. So what are the quick tips that can help an IC patient swim? Rinse off before you get in. When you're done, get out immediately and get out of that wet swimsuit immediately. Like take a shower and rinse the chemicals off your skin. If the pool was treated in the last 24 hours, it's really important to wait another day or two. You got to let those pool chemicals start to gas off so that they're not so sharp. And hot tubbing, I would skip the hot tub if your bladder's really, really sensitive. I mean, hot tubbing is great, but again, hot water, untreated, lots of bacteria, lots of other things, creates a pretty significant risk of issues. I had one patient, just to kind of give you an example, who had a brand new hot tub installed at home. Literally, they installed it like on her back porch, and they filled it up and they put the chemicals in. And it was bubbling and it felt good. She's like, "Can I get in?" They said yes. She got into that pool, into that hot tub, and got a very, very severe chemical reaction from it. You never, ever, ever get into a freshly treated hot tub. You always wait at least 24 hours for those chemicals to gas off. And I had something very similar happen to me where I was swimming in a pool that bombed the pool and forgot to put their close sign up. That was when I was 32. And my very first diagnosis after that was chemical cystitis, that I had the equivalent of a chemical injury or burn in my bladder, in my urethra, on my vulva from that pool experience. So we have a big article on our website on that. We have always talked about swimming and the things that you can do to make swimming helpful, especially for women of a certain age, or if you just have very, very sensitive skin. Put some Vaseline on before you get in the pool. Put your Vaseline on any of that sensitive skin down there, because the Vaseline will act as a barrier and will push the pool water away from your more sensitive skin. Or you can use vulva balm. You need to use a little bit of an oil there. We have an article on icy friendly salads, because it's salad time, my friend. Lots of fruits are in season. Hit your farmer's market. What else do I have in here? No, just other associated things. I do not have any new videos in our masterclass yet. They're all filmed. I just haven't had the time to do them. All right, so that's the update in our newsletter. Hello, Kathy. Thank you, honey. Bonnie, hello. It's nice to see you too. I hope you're doing well. Happy Father's Day to any fathers who might be watching. And please, 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 if your dad is still with you, call your dad and wish them Happy Father's Day if you haven't done that yet. And if your dad has passed, take a moment and just thank him. Thank him for being a dad. Listen, they're not perfect. Dads are not perfect. Moms are not perfect, but they tried. Most of them really do try. And it's really nice to remember them. All right. Okay, guys. So we have been going for a little over an hour. I know it's Father's Day and it's a summer day and we all want to be out. I am here for you and your questions. So ask me questions. Darla says, what about saltwater pools? Saltwater pools are great. They're natural. They do use a little bit of bromine, but it's a tiny amount. I say go for it. Just rinse off afterwards. That's all. We just don't want you bring a spare. Like if you like to swim and then sit out in the sun, swim first and then go shower off, change your swimsuit, and put on another swimsuit to lay out in the sun. Let's just get those chemicals off of your skin. That's just really, really important. Here, give me 1 sec. I'll be right back. I need to go to the bathroom. Quick bio break. All right, I'm back with the ponytail. Bonnie said, then you also need sunscreen. That's true. And there's a lot of warnings about sunscreens now. I am a sea and ski girl. Man, I grew up with sea and ski. I love the smell of sea and ski. It is my happy place. They don't make it anymore, and I miss it. That to me is the happy aroma of summertime, and it's wonderful. So I use CeraVe Mineral, and then I use Bum Buddy, but it's kind of thick and sticky. I don't really like it that much. I'll tell you one thing. I always use chapstick with the sunscreen, and all of my makeup has always had sunscreen in it my entire life. I never go without sunscreen on my face. That's for sure. All right. You guys, you got to give me stuff. Ask me questions. Otherwise, if you need to go celebrate Father's Day, that's okay. I can do that too. But let me do this real quick. I think we're going to... Okay, hold on a sec. Let's just take a look. And let's just see if anything else new has been added. Lots of comments and debates on articles. New treatment, 8-aminoguanine in the management of cystitis, which is interesting. They've been doing animal studies with that. They are getting ready to do human studies where in the animal studies, they basically purposefully damage the bladder, and then they use treatments to try to heal that damage. Obviously, I gave up my entire career in drug development because I don't believe in torturing animals to that degree, but that is a real way that they study bladder injuries. So 8-aminoguanine is a new treatment that may be happening. Also, low energy shockwave therapy from bench to clinic. We are seeing more and more doctors using shockwave therapy with very good results. A low energy shockwave therapy can reduce bladder inflammation and pain while also facilitating tissue regeneration. It can temporarily increase mucosal permeability and enhance the effectiveness of some bladder installations. Clinical trials with IC have demonstrated it has therapeutic effects in pain control and improving the symptoms of IC without any side effects. So we are seeing more of the top doctors starting to use low energy shockwave therapy. That's exciting. One of my colleagues is Jane Malink. I've known her for well over 30 years. She runs the International Painful Bladder Pain Association. She's based over in the Netherlands. And Jane is a brilliant researcher, author. She has been contributing to the IC world for decades now. She wrote a very insightful kind of editorial on the state of IC today. And I don't have her permission to read it to you. I will say, let me just give you a couple of highlights on what she wrote. The international IC organizations have been working steadily for the last couple of months. We have produced a very strong paper asking for more research, and we will be getting that published in several journals. I am one of the co-authors. I'm not the lead author because I have lots of other things to do. And frankly, there are other people that are better than me doing that. And Jane in particular. but just know that we as a unit are working really, really hard to advance IC research around the world, but we face really significant challenges. Number one, some doctors don't want to treat IC anymore because they don't feel like they're really good therapies. But our challenge is they're not reading the guidelines. If we could just get them to read the guidelines, we could have more treatments for them to use. But she makes a good point in here. IC has experienced turbulent times with numerous changes in naming, definitions, and classification, often based on theories, ideologies, and politics rather than on real patients and real symptoms, and has been increasingly dominated by pain and psychology theories rather than down-to-earth urology. This has caused worldwide confusion and disagreement for many years. So this is kind of the point that the IC patient international organizations are taking, is trying to point out the deficiencies in IC research recently and in a better direction that we can go. She says here, failure to exclude confusable diseases adequately has resulted in non-bladder, pelvic, and gynecological disorders being misdiagnosed as IC and even considered as phenotypes. This has been exacerbated by reluctance to perform a cystoscopy and to separate Hunner lesion disease from non-lesion. What was once a bladder disease has become a vague pain syndrome. And then she asked the right question: have we learned from past mistakes, and where do we go from here? So this is a lovely contribution to the IC world. Well done, Jane. Platelet-rich plasma. We're seeing in success with that. Somebody's combining shockwave therapy with platelet-rich plasma. That's in China. Where's the hot IC research happening right now? It's happening in China. Listen, here in the United States, IC research is pretty dead. And the reason why it's dead is because our government is not supporting it anymore. For the first time since the 80s, we do not have a dedicated IC research team at the National Institutes of Health, and that is absolutely heartbreaking. Hopefully, with the new administration, the National Institutes of Health will begin funding more research, but right now it's pretty slim. Hold on a sec. Oh, this is interesting. What is this? Optimizing the diagnosis of IC, an ESSEC proposal. That's a European Society for the Study of IC. What are they saying here? An expert working group held a series of meetings through 2023 and 24 to create a new consensus on optimizing the diagnosis of IC. They say a cystoscopy is essential to rule out other things. They're asking for bladder biopsies again. Yeah, that's not going to work in the United States. But they are focusing on phenotyping and subtyping, so that's good. Okay. Our health insurance companies don't want to pay for cystoscopies, so we don't see a lot. Hello, Peggy. Nice to see you, honey. Sandra said, how many times can you have your Hunner's lesion cauterized before your bladder is full of scar tissue and your bladder is so small it holds very little urine? I've had 2, and the doc said I have a very small bladder. I'm afraid to get another one. I'm also incontinent. Woo! Well, isn't that a fantastic question, Sandra? You have to understand that the way the bladder works is it's basically a balloon. It starts small, and then as urine fills it, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then once you empty your bladder, it shrinks down again. So what makes the bladder work is its ability to stretch. The way the bladder accommodates urine is by stretching. And it's fascinating biologically how the bladder does that. We still really don't understand the mechanisms of how it expands and contracts. I mean, it's really, really interesting. But the harsh reality is that when you have scar tissue in one area, it can't contract anymore. It's restricted by the scar tissue. Every time you have a lesion cauterized, you leave scar tissue. That is why steroid injections became very, very popular because a steroid injection has pretty much the same effectiveness as laser therapy, but it doesn't leave any scar tissue at all. So, Sandra, have you had any steroid injections? I wouldn't be afraid of the steroid injection. I don't know. I don't think anybody's ever quantified how many. You just have to assume that the more you have, the more scarred it gets, and that sucks. And that's why we're so excited about lactoferrin, because the lactoferrin IC study that was released 2 years ago showed Hunner's lesions healing, which is why almost every patient who has Hunner's lesions is at least giving that a try first, since that's a really simple over-the-counter supplement. It's not a man-made chemical. It's derived from colostrum. It's a protein in our immune system, which helps our body fight inflammation and helps our body fight infection. And now that we have very, very strong research that's linked Hunner's lesions to viral infections, that helps us understand why lactoferrin would be helpful for them. And I just it was like 10 days ago, I had a patient call, or a client call, who had just had her follow-up cystoscopy after being on lactoferrin for about 6 months, and her Hunner's lesions had greatly improved. In fact, I think what did she say? I'm trying to remember exactly what she said. Like, they couldn't find some of them, that they had completely healed, and others had gotten smaller and much better. Darla said, do you think after getting an ICU Darla says, do you think after getting IC diagnosis, to me, it seems heat affects me more? Odds are, honey, it is the medication you're on. Medications are very well known for increasing heat intolerance. I was on hydroxyzine, also known as Atarax or Visceral. It made me very, very heat intolerant. Normally for me, I was a pro tennis player. My favorite weather was high 90s, low hundreds, playing tennis tournaments. I love that. That was my identity for many, many years. And once I was on hydroxyzine, I felt sick after it was 85. And I was on hydroxyzine for 6 or 7 years. So I feel that. Sarah said, sunburn on back now. Swim mates are great. I think I bought PVC type for whitewater rafting. Thankfully, incontinence products are available for summer water activity. I didn't know that. That's cool. Bonnie said she just had a 3rd spot of skin cancer taken off. Yep. Man, I had an enormous, enormous for me, like right here. Can you see the scar right there? I had this little tiny, a spot that was like, I don't know, the size of a pea, that looked like a little volcano. I just thought it was just nothing to worry about. My dad looked at that and went, you need to go to the doctor right away. So I went to the skin doctor, and she just sliced it off. Couldn't have been easier. And then they called me and said, hey, you need to come back. We need to take a little bit more. And I'm like, really? And they're like, yeah, come on back. So I made my appointment, and I came back, and I'm by myself, and they walked me into the surgical department. I'm like, wait a second. I stopped at the door, holding onto the door, going, why am I walking into a surgery room? And they said, well, we need to take more. And I'm like, that's fine, but why are you walking me into a surgery room? And I ended up with, like a 4-inch incision. It was a basal cell carcinoma. And I'm like, why didn't you tell me? And they were like, oh, we didn't want to scare you. Thanks a lot. I walked out to my car shaking. It's like, whoa, I didn't expect that. One of the reasons why I stopped playing tennis is I was giving a tennis lesson at I was a tennis instructor at UC Santa Barbara. I used that to pay for college, and I was giving a tennis lesson to a dermatologist, and he grabbed me by the hands. I was like 21 at the time, and he goes, "How old are you?" And I was like, 21. He goes, "You do realize you already have the hands of a 40-year-old?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Look at all this skin damage. This is sun damage." And he said, "You're going to have cancer soon. And if you want to protect yourself, you need to get out of the sun now." And I was shocked. And a month later, I had my first cancer, which was that white spot right there. It sucked. It's absolutely sucked. And then I had one here, and then I had one here. Very annoying. Peggy said, "Not only did lactoferrin help my bladder pain, it helped my GI problems. I take 2 a day." Peggy, that's awesome. Congratulations. Hello, Kayleen. Nice to see you. Kayleen says, "Hi, Jill. Happy Heavenly Father's Day to your dad." Thank you. Thank you. I was thinking about him yesterday. Eddie on YouTube says, "It seems like CAC COVID-associated cystitis has been talked about more now. Any new updates on treatments?" No. The only thing that we can suggest for COVID-associated cystitis is lactoferrin. Or anything that can reduce inflammation. So let me explain this again a little bit. Right when COVID started, in that January, February of that year, within I think by March, the researchers in Germany released a paper in which they documented a bunch of their COVID patients developing IC-like symptoms, like really severe, extreme cystitis. They called it de novo cystitis. De novo basically means new onset. These patients had no history of any bladder issues before getting COVID. And I'm gonna say this in a way that might kind of gross you guys out, but just bear with me here a moment. When COVID first hit, and at least here in the United States, and people were dying up in Seattle because that's where it hit first. I didn't believe what anybody was saying. I went straight to the autopsy reports because they were publishing autopsy reports of COVID patients, and they were filled with blood clots, lots and lots and lots of blood clots. And I knew from reading the autopsy reports that this was going to be a very big deal. And so in the autopsy reports of patients who had died or patients who were in the ICU with severe COVID, they found COVID living in the bladder wall. Okay, it was there. And there was a study early on, and it was about men who had COVID who couldn't have erections. And they found the COVID virus like living in their penis. Because this virus is a circulatory system virus. Once it hits the circulatory system, it goes everywhere. So it can go through, and where it lands in the body often determines the symptoms that a patient will have. So we knew for sure that COVID could make it to the bladder and cause issues. But for some patients, they didn't find COVID in the bladder. What they found instead was the cytokine storm, that massive, because the devastation of the virus was our body's reaction to the virus, that our immune system basically kind of went haywire trying to kill this. And it caused something called a cytokine storm. And cytokines are what caused all the lung damage. Cytokines are very, very damaging. And so what they found were a lot of cytokines, that cytokine storm happening in the bladder wall at the same time. So whether it was a virus living in the bladder or the cytokine storm in the bladder, a number of patients who've gotten COVID have COVID-associated cystitis. Now, what the research shows is that, well, there's two ways to look at it. What our study showed, we then surveyed IC patients to ask how their IC was affected by COVID. And if I remember correctly, 25% said they had no problems. 75% of IC patients who got COVID reported much more severe flares. And then a small percentage of those had agonizing flares from COVID, like really bad bladder wall flares. And because they kept asking, what do we do? What do we do? And again, this is where lactoferrin, I think, is just solid, but we have to let the body recover. We have to let that cytokine storm diminish. And there's no way to do that other than time. So what the research showed is that most COVID-associated cystitis resolved after several months, like 6 months. So the first couple of months, really rough, but by month 6, everything calmed down because the cytokine storm calmed down and the body began to fight off some of these infections. So it's a real thing. It's a real thing. And we just, you know what, let me just out of curiosity, because honestly, I haven't, since I'm at the National Library of Medicine right now, let me just, COVID cystitis. Let's just see if there's anything new. Whoops, hold on a sec. Oh, okay, look at this. 65 papers. Wow. Several, okay. Successful conservative management of cystitis following COVID-19 infection. So let's see what that said. A 56-year-old male presented 5 weeks after recovery from COVID pneumonia with fever, flank pain, lower abdominal pain. Investigations revealed severe hyperglycemia, leukocytosis, pyuria. CAT scan of the kidneys, ureters, and bladder demonstrated gas and anterior bladder wall dehiscence. That's gas in the bladder wall. Some life-threatening urinary tract infections produce gas that ends up in the bladder wall. Urine culture grew Enterococcus fecalis. The patient was managed conservatively with bladder drainage, glycemic control, and prolonged culture-directed antibiotics. Despite extensive disease, he remained clinically stable and showed a completely recovery on follow-up imaging. This case highlights that conservative management can be successful even in extensive emphysematous, how do we pronounce this? Emphysematous cystitis following COVID-19. And emphysematous is infection that produces gas in the bladder wall. Who knew? Okay. The genitourinary phenotype of COVID, a personal perspective. Oh, from Michael Chancellor. Isn't that interesting? Dang it, it's not free and it's not there. I'd have to pay $39 to read that paper. Okay, we'll pass on that. Hold on. Unveiling the genitourinary phenotype of long COVID. Okay, let me just go to the conclusion of that one. Okay. Oh, fascinating. So, people have been talking about long COVID, sometimes POTS, that there are symptoms that can persist after COVID infection, like I have heart issues from my COVID infection that we would classify as part of long COVID. Thankfully, medication keeps that controlled. These guys now say that long COVID can also trigger a genitourinary symptoms encompassing menstrual irregularities, erectile dysfunction, cystitis, and kidney impairment. Recognition of this phenotype is crucial for improving diagnostic accuracy. Wow, that's like, damn, that's big. Oh, who did this paper? Where is this? Germany, Chile, Ecuador, and the School of Public Health at Washington University in St. Louis, USA. Okay, wow. That's really big. I'm going to have to get onto that. Wow, that's huge. Here's another. Okay, here's a case report. This case report describes a 71-year-old woman who developed persistent urinary urgency following recovery from COVID-19 that was successfully treated with oxybutynin. This case is contextualized within expanding literature on COVID-associated cystitis. Okay. Emerging data supports a pathophysiologic role for both inflammatory cytokine release and viral receptor expression in the bladder. See, I was right. With symptom overlap between COVID-associated cystitis, overactive bladder, and interstitial cystitis. Recognition of COVID-associated cystitis is clinically significant. Preventing misdiagnosis is bacterial cystitis. Okay, look at that, guys. Wow. I got it right. And this was done at Lake Erie College of Medicine. Okay. Love it, love it, love it. Wow. Who knew? Okay, hold on a second. Anything else here? I'm looking for treatment. Remote versus in-person. Ongoing symptoms after COVID infection. Okay, let's look at that one real quick. They analyzed almost 2,000 participants who had COVID or influenza. COVID household had significantly higher prevalence of ongoing symptoms, of urinary symptoms. Okay. Well, looks like I've got some reading to do. Damn. Anything else here that's interesting? Therapeutic efficacy of transurethral amniotic bladder injections for the treatment of non-responsive COVID-associated cystitis. Here's a case of hemorrhagic cystitis by Polyoma JC following COVID. Ooh, that's interesting. Identification of shared pathogenic mechanisms between COVID-19 and IC. Wow. Okay. So the take home of that is there are a group of patients with long-term COVID who are displaying long-term kidney and or bladder symptoms. That is new to me, and that is amazing. Good to know. Very, very important to know. Eddie, thank you for bringing that up. Really appreciate it. Risk Taker says, lactoferrin, I'm thinking about increasing it. I think I have ulcers. Well, the lactoferrin IC study did 1,000 milligrams a day for the first week. They did 400 milligrams a day for the following 2 weeks. And then they did 200 milligrams a day for several months afterwards. But you have to have the 200 milligram capsules. We don't have 200 milligram capsules. We have 300 milligram capsules. So for patients who want to try to replicate the study, I say 3 a day for a week, 2 a day for 2 weeks, and 1 a day for several months. And lots of patients have done that with success. Some has not helped. Not going to help everybody because we all have phenotypes, but it's an interesting experiment that is much cheaper and much less risky than some of the more aggressive therapies. I mean, here's the thing. When the lactoferrin IC study came out 2 years ago, it's a week post of a double mastectomy. And I read that heavily medicated, and I just couldn't believe it. It's like, no way. There's no way this showed Hunner's lesions healing. And so I said, clearly I must be medicated. I put it aside for 2 months to heal. I came back to it, and I read the research, and then I read a bunch of other studies, and God damn it, it worked. It just legitimately helps some patients. Not everybody, but some. Excuse me for swearing. But Hunner's lesion patients have very few options here. And if there is even a remote chance that this simple over-the-counter supplement that comes from cow colostrum, there were no side effects in the IC study. And you have to remember the goal of lactoferrin anyway. Lactoferrin is an essential protein that our body makes to fight infection. We have lactoferrin made by our body right now in our tears and our vaginal secretions. It is a front line of defense for the human body. It is. The challenge is that our body sometimes struggles to make lactoferrin. And when that happens, we can become more vulnerable to infection. And so researchers for the last 20, 30 years have been studying using cow lactoferrin to see if it would help fight human diseases. And by golly, it does. And there's a big blog on the front page of the IC Network where I link a lot of research studies. You can look at that research yourself. So this research team in Italy first studied lactoferrin with recurring infections. And the challenging infections like Enterococcus and Klebsiella. I mean, I believe that there was research showing success for both of those infections with lactoferrin. Anyway, I don't remember if their exact study did that, but I've read those additional studies. Their study found that the use of lactoferrin helped prevent or your body fight off pathogens associated with recurring UTIs. And that was a good study. And so 3 years later, they did the IC study. And the IC study was great. It was 31 patients. Was it 31 or 32? I think it was 28 out of 31 had a complete and total resolution of their symptoms. Red inflamed bladders that they looked at with cystoscopy. They deliberately looked at the bladder, mapped the bladder out, mapped Hunner's lesions out before the study and then after the study. Red inflamed bladders became pink and healthy. And they measured inflammation with blood testing. And guess what? Systemic inflammation throughout the body also improved dramatically, significantly. So the 28 out of 31 patients were asymptomatic and had no flares. The other 3 had 1 flare after treatment. And again, no side effects. So to me, there are people who say, well, it's not a double-blind placebo-controlled study. And that's absolutely right. It's not a double-blind placebo-controlled study. But it was good enough that when combined with the many other studies on lactoferrin that have established a very clear and favorable safety profile, it was a no-brainer because, again, Hunner's lesion patients are suffering. And if there was even a remote chance that a couple months on lactoferrin might help to calm those lesions down and reduce pain and reduce that flare, that's why I did my story on it, because Hunner's lesion patients need hope and they need help. Sarah said, Medicaid will pay for incontinence supplies. Unfortunately, Medicare only over-the-counter benefits with average plans. When I was dual eligible with full secondary Medicaid, they paid for my incontinence pull-ups. I initially used Lorraine Family Medical Supply, which was acquired by Aeroflow Urology. I last ordered from comfortplusonline.com. There's a product by Tranquility. There's a product by Tranquility called Swim Mates. I bought the Quicksorb reusable incontinence pants from a local drugstore. Huh. How would you? I can't imagine how that would work in swimming. I mean, I would assume it would just fill with pool water. Interesting. Very, very interesting. Oops, sorry. Eddie said there's still no common test to check for COVID spike protein in the urine. I don't think so. Let me look it up. Let's see. COVID spike protein bladder. Oh, effects of vaccination against COVID-19 on overactive bladder symptoms. Let's look at that real quick. A total of 1,500 patients between the ages of 18 and 45 were included in the survey. Most got the Pfizer vaccine. Most received 3 doses. The proportion of females who received the AstraZeneca vaccine and do not require to urinate during the night is significantly higher compared to men. COVID-19 vaccine has been found to improve the lower urinary tract and overactive bladder. Initially, symptoms worsened, and the symptom score is increased after the first. However, symptoms improved after receiving the 3rd or 4th doses. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I believe in vaccines. I mean, I'm a scientist. I 100% believe in vaccines. I've had every COVID vaccine there is. I will never have another one. Never. Because the last vaccine I had put me into AFib. And I was literally, when the fire department, 12 hours after I had the vaccine at noon. I woke up at 2 in the morning or 1 in the morning. My heart was racing. I was very ill. I could barely walk. And I've never felt my heart do what my heart was doing. It was terrifying. And I called 911 and to get to the hospital because I couldn't drive myself. Otherwise, I would have driven myself as I've done. And they first asked if I was stressed, and I went, no, if I were stressed, I'd be in the bathroom right now. They put the heart monitor on me and they gasped. And when the ambulance got there, the first question they asked me was if I wanted to be revived. They thought I was going to die. Literally, they thought I was going to die. It's crazy. Well, of course I didn't, praise God. And we get to the ER and they're following massive AFib. And I'm literally with my phone reading the National Library of Medicine's latest vaccine research, which shows that the more vaccines you have, the greater the risk of AFib. And then one of the ER doctors went, yeah, my wife has that too. And I'm like, God damn it. Why didn't anybody tell me that? I mean, I'm really angry at Kaiser Permanente. They didn't provide any warnings. If I had been informed that there was any risk of any heart rhythm issues, I would have never done it. And I regret it immensely because now I live with occasional bouts of AFib. And oh my God, I will admit that I'm a little leery of going far. I'm stressing my heart. AFib is scary. I don't like it at all. Susan said, yeah, I went to the hospital the day after my 5th COVID shot, hemoglobin down to 4, got a blood transfusion on the spot. So no, yeah. And again, I'm not an anti-vaxxer at all. I mean, vaccines save lives, and I'm very, very excited about the new UTI vaccines coming up. But the COVID vaccine, not for me, not anymore. And the doctors and the cardiologist was like, yeah, you can never have another one. The only vaccine I will get is a tetanus vaccine. That's it. No flu shots for me either, because I've gone into tachycardia with flu shots too. I'm just so lucky. Yeah, not. Eddie said, okay, Risk Taker said, what's your take on water fasting? The advantage of fasting in the IC patient is cleaning up your diet and getting rid of residual acids. So, but a water diet is very extreme and perhaps not necessary. That most IC patients who are diet sensitive, and that's going to be the Hunner's lesion patient, the estrogen atrophy patient, chemocystitis patient, even the COVID patient, it's a low acid diet and it's a no caffeine diet. And so losing the soda, losing the coffee, losing the matcha, losing green tea, losing black tea, losing citrus, losing pizza, losing tomato sauce, and just calming everything down. This is about getting back to a simple, fresh, healthy diet. And so, like, my diet is about as pristine as it's ever been in my life. And that is, I don't shop in the middle of the store other than for a gluten-free pancake mix. I get fresh fruit. I get fresh vegetables. I get chicken, rotisserie chicken. That's pretty much what I live on. And if I do popcorn without butter or without anything on it, or I do no salt organic tortilla chips, which I don't like to do. In fact, I bought a bag and I had about 10 chips last night, and it's like, I need to throw those away. I'm trying to lose this new menopause stomach belly that I have. That's very annoying. We'll see. But honestly, I like my stomach is a lot happier, and it's just so nice to not be constipated and not have spasms and bowel stuff going on. It's so nice to just be normal again. And I think in hindsight, we can all look at how bad the mass-produced diet is for us. High in sugar, high in fat, not enough fiber. It's no wonder so many people have IBS. And I mean, not just from medications, but from the horrific American diet. We all have to remember that these companies make money by keeping us addicted. They want you to be a customer. Why were Happy Meals created, my friends? Happy Meals were created to get that young child addicted to McDonald's. How did they do that? They put a lot of sugar and salt and fat in their food. Sugar, salt, and fat is the magic combination that triggers the addiction center in the human brain. And throw in the soda, throw in the salty French fries, throw in the sugar and the ketchup. And so we have to break free from this horrific food that we've been eating for so long. It's horrific. It just is. My sister and I am like, so we're Norwegian and Swedish, okay? I mean, that's it, 100% Norwegian, Swedish. There's nothing else in there. I am pure Scandinavian. I should be living in Norway right now. I could live in Norway right now. I have family there. What is the Norwegian diet? Cheese and milk, fat. Because if you live by the Arctic Circle, think about a walrus. You eat a lot of fat to get through winter. Got to store a lot of fat to get through winter. You make the fat by eating fat in some ways. And I grew up eating massive amounts of cheese, massive amounts of butter, massive amounts of Swedish pancakes or Norwegian pancakes. Every single one, everybody in the family had stomach problems. And then my mom had to have her gallbladder removed, horrific surgery. My sister had to have her gallbladder removed. I had no idea I had gallbladder disease in any way, shape, or form. The only symptom I had was pain between my shoulder blades that I thought was from sitting at the computer. Turned out I had gallbladder pain for a decade. And then one day, we thought I had a blood clot in my lungs from COVID. Speaking of COVID, it was agony, hurt so bad. Another trip to the ER, and they do an X-ray of my chest. There's no blood clot, and then they did a sonogram of my gallbladder, and it was completely blocked. The surgeon kept saying, "You have the largest stones I've ever seen in my entire career." So my sister and I are always going, yeah, the butter cream diet, cheese diet that we all grew up in takes a terrible toll, and we ate way too much of it. We should have been eating real fruit, real vegetables, eggs, whatever, but not all the pancakes that we ate, that's for sure. The things you learn as you get older, right? So Swim Mates is not an absorbent product. Oh. So it's worn under a bathing suit. It's a unisex disposable under, features inner leg cuffs and a moisture barrier to help contain. Ooh, yikes. Designed for minimal swelling, does not break apart when wet. It's incontinence underwear for bladder or fecal incontinence. Wow. That's great, honey. I'm really glad that's working for you. Well done. It's just not I don't work with a lot of incontinence patients, so I don't have any good product recommendations. You're doing a lot better job than me. The stories we tell. Risk Taker says, I cleaned up my diet too. I tried different diets, even carnivore. Icy is difficult to get rid of, but right now it's much better than before. So Risk Taker, you have to remember that we have phenotypes. Changing your diet is not going to get rid of tight pelvic floor muscles. Changing your diet is not going to get rid of estrogen atrophy. What changing your diet does is it protects your bladder, and it gives your body the tools it needs to heal more, which is good food, good protein, and vitamins and things and you don't want to take a lot of extra vitamins. This is just about giving the human body what it needs to be healthy and to heal. So I applaud you for cleaning up your diet. You know, I haven't eaten chocolate willingly since my 20s. I thought very quickly that chocolate was a trigger for me, for IBS in particular. And thankfully, all the IBS that I had before is pretty much gone. It's been gone for years now. Once I figured out the foods that were triggers for me, I did an elimination diet, and it turns out that, you know, everybody's talking about gluten intolerance and grain intolerance, and that's real because the food production process concentrates allergens. So what's the problem with white flour? Well, white flour removes all the brown fiber, the husks of the seeds of the wheat that contain the highest level of vitamins and highest level of fiber. And so when they learned how to mill fiber, and only the rich could afford it, and so in Europe, the rich who were eating all these white breads became very, very constipated. And that's why the king had a volunteer who was given the honor of wiping his bottom as he sat on the toilet for hours every morning trying to have bowel movements because there was no fiber. This is a very well-known thing. And so then in the early 1900s or late 1800s, when milling became very cheap, now the poor farmers and everybody could afford to have their wheat milled. And so the more they started eating white fiber, the more they also struggled with bowel issues, and also what is that condition where patients don't get rickets? I think it's rickets. So when they finally recognized this, the bread companies realized that they had to put the vitamins back in the milled flour, the white flour, to prevent these vitamin deficiency diseases. And that was when enemas became very, very big. That was a whole industry. And that was a whole industry driven by people eating heavily processed white bread. And we still see that today. You know, people still do colonics today, and they still, I mean, listen, if you put Wonder Bread on the shelf for 5 years and come back to it, it still looks exactly the same. It's not, these heavily preserved white products are terrible. Twinkies, come on, we all lived on Twinkies back then, and Ho-Hos, and donuts, you know, and pastries. If they don't break down, there's a problem. Don't eat them. I occasionally buy organic French fries, and I make those. The things you learn. Oh my God, I need to shave. Sorry about that. I just flashed my arm hairs. Oh my God, I'm sorry. All right, guys. Well, listen, we've been going for 2 hours, and it is Father's Day. Sarah says, happy to share my knowledge through experience. I was previously stressed about diet, especially when initially diagnosed with IC. I try to consider acidity and effects. However, I enjoy food. I've been eating a lot of bread and peanut butter, including sourdough lately. Yeah, the only white bread that I eat is my local Safeway makes a panini roll, which is a sourdough roll, and my body likes that. But I don't eat, you know, I don't eat crackers or cookies, or I don't go buy donuts. I try not to do that. I just really, really, really want to be as healthy as I can for the rest of my life. And so I don't eat butter. I cook only with olive oil. I literally make my gluten-free pancakes with olive oil in the morning. And it's just my job to do that. I have to do that. I choose to do that. And I don't drink alcohol anymore. I do no alcohol beer. I'll do a no alcohol wine. Rarely. I like no alcohol beer. No alcohol Guinness is fabulous. Tastes just like Guinness beer. You would never know there's no alcohol in it. It's tastes so good. You know, so just trying to take responsibility for helping this body heal after a rough couple of years, right? That's all we can do. All right, guys. Well, we've been going on for 2 years, and I think you're done. I think we're done for the day. So, thank you for coming. Thank you for watching. For those of you who are listening offline this week, thank you for listening this far. Really, really appreciate it. I will always be back. I always try to do it on Sundays. And I am this week working on my new book on managing pain of IC. We're just working on a lot of different things, working with Emory University on our new Elmiron patient registry to get the black box warning expanded. We're the only IC group. Guys, can I just be really serious here for a moment? I am like seriously annoyed. I'm very frustrated that the other IC groups are not making much of an attempt to educate people about the things that are happening with with the eye issues and with the bowel issues. We're the only one who's been asking for warnings. We're the only one that's tracking symptoms. We're the only one that is trying to sincerely and genuinely help patients who are struggling. And so if you find that helpful, please, if you can, support us, become a member. I mean, we can't do it without you. It takes a lot of time and effort to do what we're doing. I mean, I've got 2,500 patients in my eye study. 2,500 patients, 57% report retinal disease. We're the only ones doing it. And I don't understand why. I mean, our job is to advocate for you. Why aren't these other groups advocating for patients? I don't understand it. And it's very, very frustrating because I think that there are doctors who absolutely are still prescribing Elmiron. They're telling patients it's safe. What they're saying is, I've never seen a patient with eye issues, therefore I think it's safe. And we have newly diagnosed patients around the world who are being given a medication that could potentially make them go blind and or lose their bowel. I'm not happy with that. I'm not content with that. I believe in informed consent. I think we have to make sure that patients understand the risks versus benefits of a therapy, and the risk of this medication are growing significantly. So please come on over to the IT Network if you can. If you can maybe buy one of our books, like our new IC 101 Diet Guide or Flare Guide, or become a member. That keeps us doing what we're doing. And without it, we can't do it. So we just really need your help if you can. All right, my friends. Thank you, Leanne. Sarah says, nothing like going to an ethnic restaurant and trying to order low acidic or going to pizza in Italia. You're welcome, honey. Informed consent important. Exactly. I mean, listen, I knew that if I sat on this story, because I'm the one who broke the Elmiron story to the world. Nobody else did it. I was the one who did it. And when I saw that first case series from Emory, and then I emailed the top doctors in the United States, the IC doctors, and said, do you know about this? They only one of them did. The others had no insight or awareness that this could cause eye issues. And I said, and I couldn't wrap my mind around it. I couldn't wrap my mind around the fact that a bladder treatment could damage eyes. How is that even possible? And so I said, let's credibility check this. We can do it easy. Melissa, I got 20,000 people right now. Let me send out a survey. And Rob Maldron helped me design that survey. We sent it out. And the data was stunning very quickly. I think we had 600 patients respond in the first 3 months. And I think that 53% reported retinal disease, And you know, the first phone call I got when I sent out that very first email talking about this was from a young mother who called sobbing. She had taken the medication while she was pregnant, and her baby was born with very severe eye issues. And she cried to me over the phone, "Did this medication damage my baby's eyes?" And I told her, I said, "I don't know. I don't know." And we still don't know. Could it have? Well, if it's we now have the research that shows that eyes can change quickly. The black box warning says if you've taken it 3 years, appears to be the window for when symptoms first appear, but we have patients whose eyes changed in the first year. So could that medication have damaged a fetus's eyes? I don't know. It's possible. And we need a lot more research. So join the cause, guys. Join the cause. I'm not walking away from this. You know, I cannot in good conscience walk away from this issue. I'm going to be on this for as long as I can. All right. I'm going to say goodbye. I'll see y'all next week. All right. Goodbye, YouTube. See ya. All right.